Hello, how are you all? Welcome to my next video about mosaic art. This week I wanted to show you how you can reuse something old. This is a little box, a little wooden box that I had. It belongs to my son who will be 3 years old very soon. And basically when he was baptized, he had a set of presents and things, and he had this beautiful box with decorations on it that was given to us to keep keepsakes in. But unfortunately, over time, the decorations came off very easily and it got really dirty. And then we used it to put felt tips in because it was the perfect size. But really, I want to keep that box for him to remember his baptism. The top is light blue and the rest of the box is white. But I decided to make a mosaic with his name on the top. So I didn't have the time to show you the finished project. I mean, I didn't have time to paint the rest of the box, but I just wanted to show you something that you can do with something old, but something that you would like to keep. So I cleaned the top of the box with some acetone, some nail polish remover, because it was quite dirty. It had writing on it and grease. So if you just use a little bit of nail polish remover, or if you have any plain acetone or even plain alcohol at home, you can use that with the cotton wool to clean the paint. In this case, I didn't really feel I needed to roughen the surface. This is just an indoor project, just like all the other ones that I've done so far. And I used a glue that I knew would stick properly. What I'm doing here is I'm measuring from the top of the cover of the box. I'm measuring the same distance just to make sure that my letters are where they should be. Generally, when you're drawing letters, it's a good idea to do that. So you want to measure from the top of your item or your piece of paper, and then from the bottom you decide how thick your letters are going to be. But you can use those lines as a guide to make sure that your letters are going to look neat, even if it's just handwriting. That's just a very basic way to make something that looks a little bit neater. The thickness of my letters is according to the tiles that I'm going to be using. So I am taking that into consideration as well when I'm drawing my letters, just like I have done with all the other projects. So when you're drawing something for a mosaic, you always take the size of the tiles into consideration, just to make it easier on yourself when you start cutting the pieces. Also, when you're doing something like this where you want to write a name or a word, make sure that your letters have a similar space between them. So you want the letters to have a similar breathing space between them when you are writing them. When I do my drawings, as you will have noticed from all my other projects, my drawings are not very accurate in the beginning. I just use a pencil and maybe a Sharpie because I know that what I'm doing might change in the course of making the mosaic. So I'm not too fussy about the design to start with. Also, like I've said before, every time you do a project, every time you do a mosaic or anything else, it's an opportunity to practice your drawing skills. Even if you are just drawing a very, very simple, something very, very simple, it's an opportunity to sharpen your skills, measure things using your pencil or just your eyes, and just enjoy the whole process from start to finish. So I'm just using my usual PVA glue. I found that this glue works just as well as the other glue that I used for one of the projects, the collal glue. This is so cheap, readily available and easy to use. It's just a perfect glue to have in the household anyway. You can use it for so many things. You can use it for wood, of course for paper crafts, and anything else. I'm using the tiles that I have used for my unicorn. I did mention in that video as well that I bought a selection of colors, which was very, very good value in the end. And here I have a very nice selection of blues. Some of the blues are iridescent and pearly, and some of them are just glossy, and some of them have a more matte texture. So one of the reasons I used a mixture of colors was because I didn't have enough amounts of colors to use, only just one specific color for the whole name, but also it gives it more character and more movement when you use different shades of the same color. It just makes it more interesting. So I was very, very happy with the end result, and you will see it as well. As always, you can just fast forward and see my progress a little bit faster than the way it is on the video that I have prepared for you. Now, doing a mosaic in letters may seem difficult at first and complicated, but it's not really complicated. The main thing that you need to keep in mind is, like I said before, is the thickness of your letters. So in this case, I have done the drawing so that I can cut my tiles into half. So my tiles are 12 millimeters by 12 millimeters square, and when I cut them in half with my wheeled nippers, I get these rectangles that are 6 millimeters wide and 12 millimeters long. If I cut those in half again, then I get some nice squares that will fit when I'm doing the letters. But of course, when you want to do a circle like an O, or a curve like an S or an E, then, like I have said many times before, you need to cut those little squares either into triangles or just squares with one side that's cut more at an angle, or trapezoid shapes. And generally you just experiment with all these different polygons basically, and then when you have a selection of those, you can use them and do your letters. It's not really something very difficult. It's just a little tip that I've mentioned so many times before, and that will make it very easy for you really to follow any curve that you are doing in Mosaic. The only thing that I think you need to keep in mind is when you're doing, for example, a circle in Mosaic, it's very tempting to use, say, a square and then a triangle and then a square and then a triangle, and not make a little bit more effort to cut these trapezoid shapes. But it will look much better if you practice a little bit more cutting these pieces at an angle. It will make it look better in the end. And you just carry on like that for doing any other letter or any other curved shape like hair, eyes, fingers, flowers. Any other curved design can be achieved by cutting these pieces in that way. Of course, you can cut your pieces in just random shapes, but again, that purely depends on what you are using, what kind of tiles or stones you are using for your project. Some people want their work, their mosaic to look very, very neat and organized, and some people work more freely and they work quite fast. I think I am somewhere in between. I am used to doing quite a lot of detail when I'm doing mosaics, and so I am more fussy when it comes to doing a specific shape in mosaics. But everybody is different, everybody has a different character, and they like to use different materials. So just go with what you enjoy doing and you feel that you can complete, according to the measure of patience that you have and the amount of time that you have available. I think it is very important to find a project or make a design that appeals to you personally, something that is exciting for you personally, and then that will make it more enjoyable for you. Don't feel that you have to copy something that you have seen on the internet, somebody else's mosaic. You can just use that as a starting point, as an inspiration, and you can just translate that into your own unique project. The basic things that you need to make a mosaic is, first of all, you need a base for your mosaic. That can be a piece of wood, it can be an old tile, it can be cement board or something else like that. You can also use things like an old ceramic vase, an old chopping board. You can even do mosaic glass on glass. If you go back to some of my other videos, the glass vase that I did, you can see how I am doing that. It's pretty straightforward. And of course, there are other methods that you can make mosaics, but I haven't used any of these methods for my videos for Expressions Cafe. This is the most simple method to start with if you would like to have a go at mosaic art. The second thing that you need is a pair of cutters. As you can see here, I have my wheeled nippers. They are really fantastic for cutting glass tiles, like I have mentioned many times before. You can go online and just type in wheeled glass nippers and it will come up with different shops that sell these types of nippers. The third thing you need is obviously some kind of adhesive to stick your tiles down, and the things that we use more often is a good quality PVA glue. You can use silicone glue or a tile adhesive or even a grab adhesive, which is like a tile adhesive, but it's mainly used for sticking things onto surfaces, for example, like skirting boards or things like that. And these can all be found very easily in any DIY shop. You will have noticed that in my mosaics, I like to stick my pieces, my tesserae, very, very close to each other. That's a style that I prefer personally. And then at the end of the design, I decide if it's worth grouting or not, if I want to grout the project or not. But again, everybody is different, and you might want to do much bigger gaps between your tiles. But personally, I like to make the most of the effect of the colors of the tiles, and therefore when I'm doing these types of projects that I'm showing you, I prefer to stick my tiles really close to each other, and you will always get little gaps anyway. It's very, very difficult not to get any gaps, so you can always grout at the end of it, but the grout won't be so overpowering. There is the gap that you leave between your tiles can have a big effect on the final look of your mosaic. So the bigger the gaps between your tiles, I know it makes it easier sometimes to fill in spaces, but the bigger the gaps in your mosaic, the more kind of fractured your picture will look. And if you are using white grout, then that can really, sometimes it can just undo all the hard work that you have done on a mosaic, because when you're making a mosaic, you are using your tiles or your stones, you are using the color of each stone to create a certain effect. And when you grout the whole thing in the end, that changes the whole effect. So I think that's something very important to keep in mind when you are working. And as a rule, as I say to the people that I work with, if you are using tweezers like the ones you see here, the tweezers themselves, they have a thickness of about 1 millimeter. So when you are putting your tiles down, you can use the tweezers as a guide as to how big your gaps should be. So when you're laying your tiles down, obviously the tweezers need to get in there, and that leaves a gap from the tweezers. You can use that as your guide as to a good indication of how big your gaps should be. What I'm doing here is I'm doing a very, very basic outline of my letters, and that will help me to lay my tiles around my main theme. So in this case, the main theme is the name Joseph, which is my son's name. And again, people do different things, when they do letters, but I like to follow the letters first all around with a certain color. In this case, I have chosen to use the lightest color available all around my name, all around my letters. And then, as you will see, I gradually, as I move outwards, I gradually start using different colors that are a little bit darker, and then I reach a point where it's more yellow and bright green. So I decided to go with that style. That was possible because I had a very good selection of colors and different shades. And again, that just depends on what you want to achieve and what you have available. It is, of course, a little bit time consuming trying to follow all these curves, but it is worth it in the end. You can't really use these squares, how can I say? You could just go over the letters in a straight line. I suppose that would be easier in a way, where you see in this case, where you see the letters in the middle, so OSEP. There is a straight line there, so I suppose it would make maybe more sense just to go over that in a straight line and then fill in your gaps. But if you do try to follow that curve a little bit, it does help to give a little bit of movement to the whole thing. So it does cause a bit of extra work, but it gives a different effect in the end. So again, it's just completely up to you what you want to do, if you want to do that, or if you just want to go over all around your main theme in just a plain straight line. It is also very important when you do any type of art or handiwork, really. It is very important to have good lighting. So the best time, of course, is to work when you have daylight. But if you can't do that, you can use one or even two desk lamps or any other lamps that you have available. There have been times in the past where I have used two lamps at the same time. So I've put one lamp on my desk and then another desk lamp or something, whatever I had available, on the other side, because it is important to have good light when you're working. And if you're very limited with space, or you have pets and you don't want them to come anywhere near the glass or any other things that you're using, you can put everything on trays, just ordinary kitchen trays, or shallow boxes or shoe boxes. Find something that you already have in the house, and you can store all of your tools and materials in there until you are ready to work next time. If you use something that's quite shallow and big, then you can put all of your things there and even maybe have your tiles in different boxes according to color, with your tools ready. And whenever you are ready to work, you can just pull that box out, and there it is. You have everything ready to start again. Because that can be quite frustrating when you're working on something and then, you have to clean up because it's time for dinner, or the kids are coming home from school and they need to sit down and do their homework. It can be frustrating when you're just really in the zone, and then you have to start putting everything away again. So I have learned now to try and keep my work area tidy as much as possible, keep things away from the edge of the table, keep everything in little boxes so that if I have to quickly put everything away, I can do that very, very easily. And then I just keep my things on the counter or somewhere else out of the way. And when I want to start again, everything is there ready. And all I need to do is just place it on the table. So here you can see I have finally completed the outline of the letters, and I used a selection of white, very light grey, and some iridescent whites, and I have to say the colors look even more beautiful in real life than what you can see on the video. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do about the rest of the mosaic. I wasn't sure about the edge. I was going to go for green, but then it just didn't feel right. So what I did, and that's another tip that you can use, is if you're not sure about something, you can lay your tiles on your mosaic and then take a photo of that. And then if you want to change the color, like what I'm doing here, again, you lay your tiles temporarily, take a photo, and then just go back and pick the one that you think looks better. So in this case, at first I wasn't going to go with blue again. I thought that would be too much blue. But when I put the green all around, it just didn't feel right for me. So I finally decided to go with a certain group of blues, and again mixing all the different shades. And I think that I made the right choice. Obviously it's very, very easy to do the edge. Just a couple of things is you want to do it as neatly as possible. So lay your tiles so that they are exactly straight with the edge of your board in this case. And also the other tricky thing is that you just need to cut these shapes to fit round the corners, but that's very, very easy because if you use a good pair of cutters or nippers, then you will be able to cut curved shapes like what I'm doing here. It just needs a little bit of practice, but when you've tried it 2 or 3 times, you will see that it's not difficult at all. So you want to start from the corners of your frame and then work your way from that. In this case, as you have just seen, it makes sense to do your central theme and then do your frame before you continue to fill in the background, because if you leave the frame to the last thing, you might have a problem after getting it right. So it is better to do your frame to make that one of the first things before you move into the background. I did learn a lesson with this project. The truth is, that I'm not used to using these perfect square tiles. Usually I use Smalty, which it comes in similar sizes, but it's all hand cut. So you never get identical squares or identical shapes when you're cutting them. So when you are using perfect squares, it can be a little bit tricky when you're left with odd gaps. So that is something that I am still learning. And for this project, I did all of this work, and then in the end, I was left with these awkward gaps, and I was worried that it would not look very nice if I had to all of a sudden cut my pieces really, really thinly. In the end, it turned out okay, but I will have to try and plan my project a little bit better next time, and perhaps check my background as well as the thickness of the letters. You can see here already that over the letter J, I could have done it so that I could fit exactly 3 tiles on top of the J, because it wouldn't really matter if the J was slightly taller. You can see there that I'm using the oranges and the yellows for the top line of my background, and then I move on to a lighter color, and then I move on to a much lighter color that is very close, the color that is around my letter. And it is a little bit disappointing, but the result was okay in the end. Perhaps this is something that I can change in the future. It is possible to remove the tiles with a little bit of water, or just using a spatula and your tweezers. But you can learn from me, you can learn from my mistakes, and prevent that from happening to your own project. So I think a top tip would be, when you are using perfect squares, make sure that your tiles fit perfectly as well when you're doing a project. Keep in mind as well that when you are mosaicing a surface or a box or anything else, it will increase the weight considerably. So, for example, for this project, if I had decided to mosaic the whole thing, so the top as well as the edge, the sides of the box, it would have made it much heavier. And a lot of the times that's just not necessary. You can buy a beautiful box that you like and just mosaic part of it. You know, it's not compulsory to mosaic the whole surface of an item. You can just mosaic part of it, and the rest of it can be painted or just covered in grout or tile adhesive. There's lots of other things you can do to add textures, such as you can actually mix PVA glue with some sand and give texture to your grout or give texture to your background. So you can just experiment with all of these things. You can just get a little ceramic tile, a small size ceramic tile, and just mosaic part of it and leave the rest of it as is. So just experiment with different things. Another thing that can be very frustrating is when you're making very good progress and then you suddenly realize that you don't have enough of the color that you're using. So that can be really frustrating when you're working. So that's another thing to consider before you begin your project. Do your design and then check and double check that you have enough of each color that you need. There's a very basic principle that I have used here, I suppose, is that you can use colors that look good together. So, for example, here the blue goes really well with orange. So that's just a very basic principle. Or, for example, orange also goes really well with purple colors next to it, or black with white. So you want to think about the contrast of your colors and what will work well next to each other. If you look at the color wheel, which you can very easily find on Google, online, you will see that there are colors that the colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel are the ones that really work well together, and we see that all around us in fashion, in homewares, in any object. Really, you will notice that designers are using the colors that are complementary to each other. This stage here can be quite time consuming when you're trying to see how you're going to cut your pieces, and again it just depends on how much patience you have really, and how far you want to go with all this planning of cutting your pieces. I hope you have enjoyed this project, and again I hope that it has inspired you to try something different. So you can see that awkward gap that I have on the top of the name Joseph, and this is something that I could have avoided if I had planned it a little bit better. So this is something that I am going to take away from this project this week. One way of seeing if you're making good progress and if your colors look well together is if you half close your eyes, or if you squint, then you can see how the colors are mixing together. So in this case, even though I used the white and the very, very subtle grays at first, I did add a little bit of light blue as well into my background, but that actually looks really, really good. You have the cool colors, which is the blues and the grays in this case, and then you have your warm colors, which is of course the yellows and the oranges, and the green really is in this case is, I suppose, a cooler color, but it works really, really well next to the soft yellows. So I really love the transition that I have created. So going from the white and grey, moving on to very light yellows and greens with a very small amount of light sky blue. And then as I'm moving out further away from my letters, I'm using more vivid colors, so the oranges and the darker greens. And this is what I was trying to achieve, and of course that's why it took me a little bit of extra time to complete the project. But because I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the background in the beginning, I was thinking maybe to do some other little pictures for him, like maybe, you know, a car or a butterfly or things like that. But in the end, I just decided to play with color basically. And again, this is one of those projects that is, the design is very, very simple, but it's all about the colors and the texture of the tiles. And I have to tell you that children in general really love touching the tiles, feeling them, playing with the different colors. And of course, you need to be really, really careful when you have all these supplies, as well as if you have pets. But children really love to handle mosaic tiles. It's very fascinating for them, and this is perhaps something that you can do with any children that you have in your life. And like I have mentioned before, it is possible to get these fake, so to speak, tiles that are actually made out of a kind of sponge, and they look like stone tiles, but they are sponge really, and you can just cut them with scissors. And you can use something like that if you're working in a school or a setting where you work with children. You can experiment with that, so you don't have to use real glass or real ceramic to make mosaics. You can even just collect cardboard and card in different colors and fancy card from chocolate boxes and things like that. And you can have your own little collection of these paper tiles that you can use to make a collage basically that will look like a mosaic. And that's just a very easy thing to do when you're at home and you can't go out. It's amazing how many things we can reuse from the rubbish that we produce every day. But of course, when you make a mosaic out of glass tiles or ceramic tiles, it will last hopefully for a lifetime. I hope that I will be able to continue with my classes at Expressions Cafe in Walsall, West Midlands. The cafe is at 73 Bridge Street in Walsall Town Centre. It is still closed at the moment, but hopefully they will be able to reopen soon, and we will be able to continue with all the activities that are going on there every week. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to doing another project for you, and hopefully seeing you very, very soon in person. Take care, have fun, be creative, and I will see you very soon. The last step, of course, for this mosaic I forgot to mention is that I need to paint the rest of it, but unfortunately I didn't have time to complete that for you. But you don't really need me to show you how to paint a box. Just make sure that you're using the right kind of paint that's not going to come off, and make sure that your surface is clean before you paint the box. So that's something that I would like to do this week, is to paint the inside of the box and all of the outside white again, and that will complete the look. I will see you soon. Take care and have fun.